I love it. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Laura from Michaels. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you guys join us today for a class on jewelry making with Beadalon. We've got two of our fantastic vendors here with us today. We've got Meredith and Yvette. Both are from Beadalon. Meredith is going to be teaching the class today. She is a designer, actually, for Beadalon, and so she's got all kinds of tips and tricks that she's going to share with us. And Yvette and I are going to kind of try to tag team some questions and answers for you guys. We are going to be recording this class, and we are going to, it'll be online at michaels.com/classes as of tomorrow. So if you want to refer back, it will be online so you're able to watch it. To make sure that we are able to hear Meredith throughout the class, we're going to go ahead and keep everyone on mute. And if you could, we encourage you to post any questions or comments that you have over in the chat box. We will be watching it, and we'll wait for opportunities to just try not to interrupt Meredith too much, but we will interject now and then to ask your questions and make sure that we get all of your questions answered throughout the course of the class. So today we are here to have fun. We are going to learn about crimping and learning about different techniques and skills and finishing, and I am super excited. So I hope you all enjoy it, and let me pass it over to Meredith.
All right. Hey, Beady friends. So I'm Meredith Roddy. I am the new product marketing specialist and designer at Beadalon, and I am so excited and honored to have been asked by Michaels to teach a basic beading class for you all today. So welcome. Thank you again so much for joining me. We're going to sit back, relax, have fun, and learn how to bead. And if you are an intermediate or even an advanced beader, I always find that no matter who I am learning from, I always take something away. So whether or not it's a tip, it's a trick, it's a new way to try something, hopefully everyone who is participating today or even watching afterwards on YouTube will come away with some new knowledge and hopefully a newfound or a new passion for making jewelry. I have been doing this for about 25 years now in some capacity or another, and I started making jewelry actually as a camper way back when, and I've been very lucky to be working for Beadalon for the past 13 years in a bunch of different capacities, but the thing that I love doing the most is teaching people how to bead, and starting with a good foundation of jewelry knowledge to take designing and construction of your jewelry pieces forward to really create a lifetime of passion, really, for this really fun, way of taking your creativity and channeling it into something that you can either make to sell or make for yourself or make as a gift, which is really what I love doing the most, is gifting my jewelry creations to other people. So today what we're going to be doing is learning about the different types of beading wire and what you should choose in what situation. When you walk into Michaels or a beading store, or even looking at information online, there are so many different things to choose from. And I'm going to break it down and explain what all those different choices are and when you should choose specific things in specific jewelry making situations. So we're going to go over beading wire. We're also going to talk about crimp beads and crimp tubes, what all the different sizes mean, which size you should use in which situation, and what corresponding crimp tools you need for those different sizes of tubes and beads. We're also going to talk about taking finishing techniques kind of to the next level. It's a beginning class, but why not take it up to the next level or two while you can. And we're going to talk about wire guardians and crimp covers as ways to finish your designs. And of course, you can't finish a design without a clasp. Well, you can, but that's a whole different class. So we're going to talk a little bit about clasps and what clasps to choose and how to attach it to your jewelry. So then after all of that, we're going to make a design. So we'll talk a little bit about beads, about spacers, go over a lot of the different terms and terminology for people who are just starting out, and then for people who might be seasoned jewelry makers as well. So without further ado, I think I'm going to switch my camera to the downward mode. Laura, are we ready to do that? And we'll hop right into it.
Very good.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. All right, so I'm just going to switch to the overhead, and you can see here, it's backwards, which is interesting, but we're gonna go with it anyway. We'll put our reverse heads on.
We can see it fine, Meredith.
Oh, it's only backwards for me?
Yep.
Oh, isn't that interesting? All right, thanks for letting me know that. Okay, so here is a spool of Beadalon bead stringing wire. And this is what we are going to use to make our design on today. And the spool has a lot of information on it, and that information will inform a lot of your decisions for your jewelry making. So first things first, we have here the number 7. So here is a 7-strand bead stringing wire. Here is a 19-strand bead stringing wire and a 49-strand bead stringing wire. Now, what does that mean? What do those 3 numbers mean? Well, what that means is it's the exact actual number of little teeny tiny individual strands that are twisted together and coated with nylon. So here you have 19 strands that are twisted together. Here you have 49 strands that are twisted together. And what that means is how strong and how flexible your wire is going to be. So 7-strand is only 7 strands. So it is not going to be as strong or as flexible as 49-strand. So that's really the first thing that you have to decide when you are making your piece of jewelry. Now, as a beader, I almost always choose either 19 or 49 strand, but recently there have been a couple of projects that I've done that 7-strand is the perfect one to choose as well. This is also a great strand count to use when you are just getting started, because of course it is the most economically priced, because there are only 7 little strands in here rather than the 49 strands here on this one. The next number that you have to be aware of is this number right here. So here you can see that this is a 0.024. There we go. This one here is a 0.018. And then on this little spool, these are part of the 3 packs that Michael sells as well. This one is a 0.015. We actually at Beadalon have down to a 0.010 and up as much as a 0.036. So that's 0.036 inches, or we also have the millimeter diameters here. And why that's important, an 015 is of course going to be thinner than an 024. Let's see if I can put these next to each other and you can really see the difference. I think that that's a pretty good representation. You can see that the gray wire is much thicker than the gold wire. The choice here that you want to think of is you always want to go with the thickest wire that you can. And the rule of thumb that I use is you want to use the biggest diameter of wire that will fit through your smallest hole of your beads. And the reason why that's important is because as your beads wear on your piece of jewelry, they're rough on the insides. And there's a lot of wear and tear that happens here. So the thicker your wire, the less is moving around on the inside and the stronger and more durable your piece of jewelry will be. Okay, so that's a lot of technical information, but it's actually really important when you're constructing jewelry that you do not want to break or that you don't want to break or snap or not have the longevity that you want it to have. So on our spools of wire, the next piece of information that you want to look at is this little bead and this little tube right here. Now you may not have noticed them before, but this is actually a really good cheat sheet for what Crimp's bead or Crimp tube you want to use. Now there's a lot of discussion about whether or not you want to use a Crimp bead or a Crimp tube. Personally, I prefer a Crimp tube. I think that when you're first learning how to make jewelry, it's easier to crimp. And I personally, again, I like the way they look better. There are lots of people out there that like the crimp beads better, and that is totally, totally fine. That is a matter of personal preference. They work the exact same way, and you crimp them the same way. And that's why we like to offer a lot of different choices, because not every person is the same. Not every person likes doing things the same way. And so, like I said, I like to use the tubes, but sometimes actually a project calls for the beads. So it really depends on what you're beading as to which one that you use. The other thing I want to point out here is this little American flag. I am so proud that our factory, the Beadalon factory, we actually make this wire. And we just moved our factory from Westchester, Pennsylvania to Coatesville, Pennsylvania. But the stranding machines actually used to be right behind my office, and I could hear the machines going all day. And as noisy and as distracting as they sometimes were, it gave me a really good sense of pride that we are an American manufacturer and employing people in America making the wire. And I think that that's a really, I don't know, I think that that's a really important thing. So that is a tour of the front of the wire spool. Again, a lot of information here that you might not have really thought about, but we spent a lot of time getting all of this information on the front of the spool. Now, if you go to the back of the spool, again, it just gives a little bit of a refresher of where we are on our wire. And then here is the whole gamut of diameters that we have, and another little cheat sheet about some of the different sizes and the different findings that we have that go with the wires. So that is a lot of information about wire. So now let's move
Meredith?
on to talking about tubes. Yes.
Do you want to explain that there's different colored wires as well, and the label shows the color, and explain the different nylon colors?
Perfect. Yes. Okay, that's a great
And
idea.
it's made, all the wires are made of stainless steel.
Perfect. Okay. So Yvette has reminded me of one other part of the equation, which is this part right here that shows the color of the wire. And also, in the discussion of the strands, these are all stainless steel. So we have stainless steel strands here coated with nylon. And this is the bright color, of course, this kind of gray color, which is a great all-purpose beading wire. We also have it in several different colors. And here you can see the gold. There's also a silver, which I don't have ready. We were joking beforehand about all of the things that I had at arm's reach, but silver color beading wire is not one of them. But the great thing about the gold and the silver beading wire is that if you use this through translucent beads that you can see through, they really enhance the colors of the wire. So it doesn't make that much of a difference to use a silver or a gold color wire or a bronze or any of the other colors that we have with these opaque beads. But if you were using crystals or translucent gemstones, and you put that silver or gold wire through it, they really shine from within. And that's what I use almost exclusively when I am beading with beads that are translucent. Good enough?
Hey, Meredith, what does the number 1 and the number 2 mean? Like why?
Okay, so perfect. So back to that, and that's actually a good segue into talking about the different sizes of crimp tubes. So what the number 1 and the number 2 refer to is the size of the crimp bead or the crimp tube that corresponds with the wire. So for example, this is an 018 wire, and that's what we are going to be beading with today. And that 018 wire is going to require a size number 1 crimp bead or a size number 2 crimp tube. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So I have here, I just have all 4 sizes of the crimp tubes to talk about. But when I take them out, you can see And a good tip is to open this up with a pair of pliers. It helps save your fingernails, even if you haven't had the opportunity to have a manicure in 3 months. So I'm hoping that with the way that the camera is, and I'll bring them up a little bit closer to the camera too, so you can see the differences. But these are all of the different sizes of crimp tubes. So it goes from size 1 to size 4. And for whatever reason, what is the word that I'm looking for? The convention is that crimp tubes are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and crimp beads are numbered 0, 1, 2, and 3. Why is that? I have no idea. If somebody knows the reason, please let me know. But you can see these little teeny tiny size 1 crimp tubes. They're so small. This is for the smallest diameter of the wires. And also for an upcoming project that is posted. Laura can talk a little bit about that, more about the second class that we're having when she wants to interject on that. But we'll be using these little teeny tiny guys for that. Then the next size, and what we're going to be using today, are size 2. I'm sorry, yeah, size 2. So these are 1s, these are 2s. I'm trying so hard, there we go. And this is the most popular of the sizes. That will fit a 0.015, 0.018, and sometimes if you're feeling lucky, a 0.024, although we oftentimes will actually recommend using a size 3 for the 0.024. And the size 3s are just a little bit bigger than the 2s, and then the biggest one yet are the 4s. And these are really good for if you want, if you're using very thick wire, or if you're using multiple strands of wire. So the number 1s and the number 4s might not be the ones that you're going to use the most, but they're great to have in your beading stash, because when you need them, for example, if you're doing a design that has a lot of strands of beads or very thick, I'm sorry, not strands of beads, well, strands of beads, yes, strands of wire, or very thick wire, those number 3s and number 4s are going to be your best friend. Okay, so that
Hey,
is
Meredith, one more question.
That. I'm sorry, yes, Yvette?
Do you want to explain why people would choose to use beading wire over string or other types of cord, and why, basically the difference on why to use beading wire?
Absolutely. So beading wire is going to be your strongest material. It's stainless steel, and this one in particular is 49 strands of stainless steel. So when you're thinking about making jewelry, especially if you're making jewelry with beads that are heavy, with beads that are large, with beads that have rough insides, and designs that you want to last a lifetime, you really want to go with beading wire. Thread is great and it has its purposes. Silk is great also, it has its purposes. But when you're making jewelry, I don't want to say real jewelry, but I'm going to say real jewelry, that you want to last, that you're either selling or gifting, a much more professional and long-lasting beading material to use is going to be beading wire. You cannot beat it for strength, durability, and longevity. Right? Okay, so now we covered wire, we covered crimp beads or crimp tubes, and I kind of use them interchangeably. The next part of the equation is your different crimp tools. So there are, for the purposes of this discussion, 3 different crimping tools. And there are different kinds of crimping tools out there, but these are the ones that we recommend and the ones that I recommend as giving the strongest and most secure finish. So the micro crimper has a very small jaw, and that is what you use for the little teeny tiny size 1 crimp tubes or the smallest of the crimp beads. And just for comparison's sake, you can say the jaws of the standard crimping tool are slightly bigger than the micro crimping tool. And this is the one that you're going to use the most. So if you're new to beading and you're thinking, well, which one should I buy? Get the standard crimping tool. That is going to be your workhorse in probably 90 to 95% of your beading needs right now. Lastly, and we talked about those great big crimp tubes and crimp beads. Oops. The mighty crimper, and you can see how big those jaws are. That is going to be the tool to get those great big crimp tubes and crimp beads safely and securely closed. This, incidentally, is also really good for closing crimp covers, which we're going to get to in a couple of minutes. But it also, it takes a very, very gentle hand to be able to do that. So we're actually going to use a different technique because more people will have a chain nose pliers than will have a mighty crimping tool for that. Okay, so I think that we've covered all of the information that I wanted to go over before we got started. We talked about wire, we talked about the crimp tube sizes, we talked about our corresponding crimp tools. Let's talk a little bit about clasps. So today I'm choosing a clasp from the Beadalon variety pack, and this one comes with both lobster claws and with spring rings. I love when I'm teaching and I totally blank on the names of the simplest of all possible clasps. And this is something that I'm sure everybody recognizes from jewelry that they've had. It's just a very simple spring ring. And then we're also going to need for our design today some wire guardians. And what these little guys are, this is what they look like in the package. They're little horseshoes. Let me tap a couple out. See if they, well, now that I've shown them, I can break the package apart. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of a go right in and destroy all the packaging kind of a person. I probably should be a little more genteel with it, but I am not. Okay, so this is what the wire guardians look like. And again, for those of you who are totally new to beading, they're little horseshoes. And what they do is they protect the end of your wire at the clasp. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is how to make your jewelry the strongest and most break-proof as possible. So we are going to talk about why it's important to have a little bit of extra protection there at the end. But this little horseshoe guy is called a wire guardian, and it is going to soon be your best friend if you don't know about them yet. I also why I love wire guardians is because I think that they look really pretty. If you look at the end of a jewelry design that's made without a wire guardian, and then you look at one that's made with a wire guardian, it just looks so much nicer and so much more professional. And then the last thing that we're going to be working with today is a crimp cover. So a lot of people, and we'll show that when we get to the crimping part, don't like the way that the crimp tubes or even crimp beads look when they're crimped. They think, well, I'd like a little bit more of a nicer finish to my design, especially if I'm using a wire guardian. So in comes the crimp cover, and there's this really fun variety pack. And so if you're like me and you destroy things right away, it's good to have a pack to have everything in. And I'm going to take out a couple of these crimp covers to work with for my design. All right, I think, oh my goodness, we are ready to start stringing up our design. So what we're doing, we're going to make a necklace, that is very similar to the one that I have as the example and what we posted for the class. And what you can see here, I'm using these gorgeous Amazonite beads. They are the bead landing 6mm Amazonite round beads. I don't know, Laura, if you want to jump in and say anything about these beads, but I really, really like all of the gemstone line that you guys have in Michael's right now, even though it's super blurry. I don't understand why it's so blurry. There we go. Just to show everybody what I'm doing. I know that when people see a pattern, they want to know exactly what it is that the pattern is made from. So these are 6mm beads, and then in between them, these black beads are considered spacer beads because they're adding a space in between those 6mm Amazonite beads. These are size 8s, real quick, because this isn't a seed bead class, but very quickly, there are a slew of different sizes of seed beads. You have your 15s, which are your smallest, your 11s, which are a little bit bigger, then size 8s, which are the size here, size 6s, which is actually what I am going to be using today, and then even bigger and even smaller seed beads. Do not be afraid of small seed beads, my friends. There are lots of tips and tricks and ways that you can work even with the smallest of beads. We're going to talk about that in upcoming classes. We'll do a little bit more on seed beads, but I love the way that you can put a size 8 seed bead in between each of these beads and not only highlight each of the beads much, much more than you would if you were just stringing them next to each other, right? You can see on this strand how different that looks than if you have the beads highlighted. But you can also really extend the amount. So you would use a lot more of your fancy beads on a 16-inch necklace than you would if you had little size 11s or even size 6s in between. So instead of just being able to make one necklace, you could make a necklace and a bracelet. Okay, so I think we all know how to actually put beads on our string, on our beading wire. I have a whole necklace almost all made up. And I love a design that just does big bead, little bead. Some people might say, oh, that's such a simple design. And I am definitely one to make a complex and crazy complicated design, but sometimes I just love a big bead, little bead design, especially for a layering necklace. But one of the things, a really good tip for designing, I'm sorry, not for designing, we're gonna get to that in a second, but how you can pick up these seed beads. Did you see the first one I did like this? Well, I can do that because this is a really big size 6 seed bead. But if this was a size 11 or even a size 15 seed bead, all I would need to do with my wire is bring it down onto my bead mat and poke the wire through the bead. That's one of the reasons why working on a bead mat is so important. Not only because it prevents all of your materials from rolling away from you, which who out there has had all their materials roll away from them? I know I have. But it also makes it, especially for those seed beads, so easy just to poke the wire into the center of those seed beads and slide it right on. And even if your eyes aren't the greatest of the eyes, or they used to be and they're not so much anymore, which I can definitely relate to, it really helps you just guide that wire, or I'm sorry, guide that bead onto the wire. Okay, so yes.
People want to know how long the strand of wire that you're using.
Yep, that's a really, really good question. So I'm actually not using any length of a wire. I am working right from the spool. And I'm really glad that the person asked that question, because I don't cut a strand of wire generally if I'm just doing a necklace or a bracelet that's a simple one strand, because this way I'm going to waste the least amount of wire possible. That same thing I do if I'm using like German style wire or artistic wire, or any opportunity that I have that I can work from the spool is one I will take, because that way, when I get to doing my clasp on the end, I'm going to waste the least amount of wire possible. If you pull out a 24-inch piece or an 18, or like whatever the inch piece is, it's possible that you will have too much or you'll have too little, and then that is a bummer in both cases, because if you have too little, you've wasted the entire piece, and if you have too much, then you've wasted the extra part. So working right off the spool is how I do it, to make sure that I waste the least amount of wire possible. So on
the tip is to actually, if you want to show people that plastic clip that comes on the spool, so you can get the end of the wire out, and it helps keep it in place while you're working on it and the wire doesn't unravel.
Yep. So that's a really good point. Let me put my bead stopper back on here. So the way that the Beadalon wire comes, there's a clip attached to it. And so what I would do is I would take the clip off, pull the wire out, and then put the clip back on. So again, thank you so much for whoever asked that question. That was something that I forgot to show. I jumped right into showing the already beaded place. I skipped over that step. So thank you very much for taking me back to that. So on my work surface here, I have a 16-inch length marked off, but I also have a ruler or measuring device that I am going to use to measure my length. So what I'm going to do is figure out, okay, I want my necklace to be 16 inches. And I know that all of the clasp part is going to be about an inch. And you can see when people teach beading, all of this becomes a big old mess. So let me move a little bit aside so everyone can really see. That's a sign of a good beading experience if you've got a big old mess on your workstation. So I allow you all to have a big old mess. Okay, so this part is going to be about an inch. So I want my beaded part to be about 15 inches. If you want an 18-inch necklace, then do the math. 17 inches of beads. There are lots and lots of resources for all of the different sizes of necklaces. I just know kind of the size that I like my necklaces to be when I wear them. So let me take back my strung design here, and I'm not able to fit this all on the camera, so you're just going to have to bear with me and believe me that it is about the length that I want it to be. Might be a little bit longer, might be a little bit less long, but for the purposes of our discussion, we're in good shape. Now, a couple of things before I start the finishing. I have ended with a small bead. I might even consider putting a size 11 seed bead here. I always find it is easier to finish off your design if you have smaller beads at the end. That is one of the tips that I think is very valuable to remember. You don't want to end your design with a large bead. This 6mm wouldn't be the end of the world, but you certainly wouldn't want to use like a 20mm bead or something really big on the end. It just helps bring everything together to have a smaller bead here on the end. All right, is there anything else I'm forgetting about, or Laura, before we start with the finishing techniques?
No, you're doing great.
We're good? Okay. Whew, there's a lot of information when you're doing basic beading, right? So I have a little bead stopper here on the end, and what this bead stopper does is it stops your beads from falling. So who among us who are beaders have not had an experience where they have strung up their perfect design, everything is symmetrical, everything has worked out, and you pick it up to test the length around your neck, and you drop it and beads go everywhere. If you use a bead stopper, that doesn't happen. And take it from me, having had that happen to me a lot of times, it is fairly devastating. Lots of inappropriate words get bandied about, and nobody is happy. So my crimp tubes are all mixed up right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and take number 2 out of the container so that I know that I'm doing the right one. Okay, so we talked in the beginning about all of the different sizes of crimp tubes, and let's just see, just for fun. Okay, I've threaded that down because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to slip through my size 6 bead. That's another reason why you want to make sure that you have a smaller bead with a smaller hole on the end, because sometimes what ends up happening is the bead or the crimp tube or the crimp bead will slide down through your bead, and nobody wants to have a frustration or a frustrating experience closing off their jewelry. So you want to make sure that you that crimp tube is not going to slide through the bead. So if it did, I would just back it off, and then I would put on a size 11 or any bead that wouldn't happen with. Okay, so now I have my crimp tube on, and the next thing I'm going to add is that wire guardian. So we talked about wire guardians in the beginning. They're this little horseshoe shape, and on both of those sides, there's actually a hole. So there's a hole on one side and a hole on the other side. So I'm going to take my beading wire, and I'm going to come up through one side of that hole and then down through the other hole. And these wire guardians will fit up to a 0.024 diameter of beading wire. 0.024 sometimes can get a little dicey, but usually I can make it work. So the next thing I need to do is find, actually, you know what? I'm going to do my tag side first. Okay, so now what is a tag? So I glossed over the tags when I was talking about the, see, I can never remember what these are called, the spring ring clasp. The other side of the spring ring clasp is a tag. So the tags come all together on this ring here. So all I need to do is find the split in the ring and open it up. I can probably do, yeah, I can do that with my fingers, and slide out the tag. Now, what I always do, and I don't know if this is a hard and fast rule, but it's a good tip. I always put the smallest side of my clasp on first. So if I'm using a toggle clasp, I will always put the bar side on first. If I am using a jump ring or a split ring, I will always put the ring side on first. I don't know if there's a reason for that other than I think it's easier to get everything worked and tightened up the right way doing it like this. So I'm going to thread on my tag. You can say I just put it around and through the lock or through the wire guardian. Now, important tip, and one that not everybody does. See how the wire guardian, the ends are apart here? Wait, let me make sure that everyone can see that. Okay, the wire guardian ends are apart. I'm going to come in with my chain nose pliers, and ever so gently, I'm going to, on camera, ever so gently, I'm going to squeeze those two ends together, okay? So the wire guardian comes, excuse me, with those ends apart. Ever so gently, I am going to make sure my tag is out of the way, squeeze them together, okay? That serves a couple of different purposes. The first is that it looks nicer. It sets you up for better crimping in frame. And it also minimizes the chance that the ends here are going to scratch. All right, so let me get my little tag in place. He is not cooperating with me, but he will once I get this crimped and my wire in place. So now this is the nerve-wracking part, right?
This is the part that we all kind of need to take a deep breath and make sure, because this is what's holding your jewelry piece together. This part, if we can get it in focus, and the next part, right? This is our crimping. So from the beginning, we learned that we need to make sure that our beading wire, our crimp tube, and our tool all correspond. So if I am using anything out of the equation, it's not going to work well. So if this crimp tube was the wrong size for the wire, or if the crimp tool I was using is the wrong size for the crimp tube, things are going to fall apart. So that is one of the first things that I ask when people say that they are struggling with their crimping is, does your wire match your crimp, match your tool? And if those three things are out of whack, then it is almost guaranteed that this will either slip out or your crimp will break. So hopefully everyone is still with me. There's a lot of information, but then once you know it, then you got it. So now crimping is 3 parts, okay? Before you start, you want to make sure, see how I'm holding these wires? You do not want these wires crossed, because if the wires are crossed in the crimp, what's happening is you are going to put way too much pressure on these wires with that crimp, and they're going to break. Remember how I said there were 7, 19, or 49 strands? Those wires are going to start breaking apart because you're basically cutting into them. So you want them next to each other. You don't want them crossed. You want them next to each other. And to do that, all you need to do is hold them in place with your thumbnail. Okay? So I have them held in place with my thumbnail. And now the crimping tool has 2 notches. You can see the smooth notch that is closest to the tip, and then the notch that has just a little bit of a divot, a little dimple in there. So the order is front, back, front. A lot of instructors and a lot of instructions omit that first step, that front step, but you'll see that it's actually the most important. So taking your crimp tool and that crimp bead in the front of those pliers, I'm going to gently compress it. So it becomes an oval. It's a very, very subtle movement. But what that does, is it allows those wires to form themselves into their separate channels. I am also going to make sure that this is tightened up and not sticking out from the wire guardian. And I'm going to do that in the next step. So my thumbnail is really the workhorse of this operation, because it is holding that wire in place and making sure, trying to get the perfect angle, and clearly nothing is, there we go. There we go. I knew I'd get it eventually. Now we just have to get it in focus. Okay, so now I'm in the back jaw. And in that back jaw, I'm going to gently press down. So now my crimp should be secure. But the last step is to come in the front part again and to rotate my wrist around and finish bringing the 2 sides of the crimp together. Now we're going to do this again on the other side, so you'll have another opportunity to see it. But notice I did not use the front part of my pliers, nor did I use chain nose pliers to flatten the crimp. Because if you use that chain nose pliers to flatten the crimp, or you come back in here with the tips of the crimping pliers and flatten it down again, all you're doing is breaking the wire. You're not making the crimp tighter. The crimp is tight now. It's not going anywhere. It is hugging both sides of that wire. If you come in and smush it down, you're actually cracking the crimp and breaking the wire. So if you learn nothing else from me today, know that by crushing that crimp, all you are doing is ruining the crimp and really ruining the wire. So I think this is a good opportunity also for me to come in and put on one of my crimp covers. So I'm okay with the way that crimp beads and crimp tubes look crimped, but a lot of people want a little bit more of a professional finish, and that's where crimp covers come in. So a crimp cover is this guy right here. It looks kind of like almost like a Pac-Man, right? Little Pac-Man guy. It is just a bead that has been opened. So in order to use this, all we need to do is slide it. This is where we have to get our eyes in there really good, because you want to make sure that the wire is coming out the bottom and the top, and everything is in there, no problems. Okay, so now you can come in, and this is, I will admit, I'm good at a lot of things, but closing crimp covers is not my best skill. It takes a lot of patience. It's easy to do, but it's also easy to do and mar your crimp cover. So I'm going to try to have some patience today. Let's see how it works. And just kind of close it from here. Make sure that you don't smush your wire guardian, and close it from here and try to stay in frame and close it from here. And your goal is to get this mouth closed. And you want to get this mouth closed without getting it too out of shape and too messed up. And the good thing is you can kind of come back and zhuzh it a little bit, but it is definitely not my favorite of all possible techniques. I just kind of wanted to get it done and done. So now we have the first side of our necklace done, and you see it's still attached to the spool. So I can come down, and I'm just going to trim this wire just a little bit. It's a little bit of a long tail. Doesn't really matter, this tail, but I'm going to tuck it in to, let's see, 2 beads. And since I still have it on my spool, I have not wasted very much wire at all. It was just that little 1-inch section that I cut off there. And now I can come, and I like to use, that's probably about perfect. What is that, about 2.5, 3 inches? Yeah, 2.5, 3 inches on the other side. And this is where we can snip it off the spool. And again, if the phone rings, if the doorbell rings, if the Amazon guy is there with a package, just go ahead and use a bead bumper here to hold your beads in place. You'll thank me for that later. Okay, so now we're at the other side. And there's actually a lot to think about here as well. For necklaces, it's not as important. Well, that's probably a loaded statement. I retract my former statement. What you want to do, or what you want to avoid doing, is picking this up and tightening everything up as tight as you possibly can get it. I have no space in here at all. It's super, super tight. You don't want that to happen. What you actually want when you're doing strung designs is to build in some, what I like to call, wiggle room, because you want to make sure that your necklace can at least wrap around twice, or your bracelet can close all the way. And the reason why you do this is, like I mentioned in the beginning, you want to make sure that you are not putting undue stress on your wire. And that is the #1 reason why jewelry breaks, is because there is undue stress on the wire. And it's so easy to eliminate or make sure that that problem doesn't arise. So just go ahead and make sure that when you are about to crimp, and I like to get in the habit of even doing it when I'm doing all of my finishing techniques at once, you want to make sure that your necklace is not straight, pulled really tight, but actually draped around so that you are building in some wiggle room. You might not like seeing a little millimeter or two here and or there of wire, but trust me, in the end, when your jewelry lasts for a lifetime, you'll be much, much happier. So I put on my crimp tube, I've put on my wire guardian. I'm going to come back around and through the wire guardian. And then I am going to take my spring ring. See how I remembered it this time? And it looks like my spring ring is just a little bit open there. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find a different one. Yeah, that one's a little bit better. And I could go and shut that, but we're coming up on time right now. Time flies when you're having fun, right? It's a lot of information. You think that bead stringing is just pick a strand of beads and go, but when you really want to do it and do it right, there's a lot of stuff to know. But once you know it, it becomes very, very easy, and there are tons of resources out there to help as well. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting the wire through, and I always like to use my tools to help me out. So I'm going to grasp onto the end of this and pull through. Did I get things a little tangled up here? Let's see what's going on. There we go. I think it's just got a little tangled up. Okay, and so like I did on the other side, I'm going to come in here and very gently close that wire guardian. Can you guys hear the rain at my house? It's all of a sudden it's pouring outside. Good for the flowers, not good for the dog walk later on, right? Okay, and so I do want to make sure that I'm tightening this up, but not so much so that there isn't some nice wiggle room in here, because all that's going to end up happening is my wire is going to be under stress, and nobody likes to be under stress, right? Least of all wire. And again, I'm using a number 2 crimp tube because I am using my 018 beading wire. So I'm using my standard crimping tool, and I'm going to come in here and use this 3-step process. I'm going to come in the front, squish it down to make it an oval, come into the back to make it into a, I don't know, a half moon, and then back into the front again. And again, I am rounding around and I'm not using my flat nose pliers to smush it down. I'm not using the front of the crimping pliers to smash it. The wire is in there and it is being hugged by that crimp tube, and it is not going anywhere. So lastly, I'm going to, of course, snip my end and tuck it into that 6mm Amazonite bead. And the last step I need to do is, of course, add my second crimp cover on this side. So just like I did on the first side, I'm going to take my little Pac-Man and put it over here. And crimp covers are also really good to use if you do have a little bit of extra room. So say, for example, this bead, it cracked, or something happened at the end and I had a little bit of extra room. I could add a couple of these crimp covers into my design to take up that slack, to take up that extra room. So there are definitely other uses for crimp covers as well. All right, I don't think I did such a bad job. We have a nice finish here. We have our nice necklace, just a very simple design with these gorgeous 6mm Amazonite gemstone beads, and the 6mm, I'm sorry, not 6mm, size 6 seed beads as spacers in between. And we want to make sure that our clasp is clasped, and we're going to hope against hope that my power doesn't go out in this storm. But that is our project for today. Laura and Yvette, how did I do? How are the questions coming in? Was I thorough? Did we touch on everything?
I think you did a great job.
Now let me pull myself back up to the front. Scooch over.
I have a
That
question.
was great.
What about, how would you explain what diameter wire to use by looking at the beads? So if you're shopping in the aisle and you're looking at beads, how would you choose the diameter?
That's a really good question, Yvette. And my lights are flickering on and off. So if I lose power, Yvette is going to have to take over for answering all of the following questions.
Are you sure you're not in a disco?
I might be, or my house is haunted. I don't know, but the lights are definitely flickering. So when you look at the holes of the beads, usually what I do is you can kind of go like this and bend them and look in the center, and you kind of get a feel for it. And you can see if the holes are really small, you're going to go for an 015. Most bead holes, especially for many of the beads that I have seen at Michael's, an 018 and an 024 are definitely going to be more of the option that you're going to go for. But really, you end up getting an eye trained for it by just kind of bending them in half and looking at the holes of the beads. Is there anything else, Yvette or Laura? Any questions in the comments? Can I go back and look at the questions afterwards and ask and look and see, or no?
Unmute there. Yes, we can get you the questions. Look at. A lot of them are people just, have been watching and enjoying the class. And next week, we've got another class coming up. Meredith's going to be teaching again on Friday at 3 o'clock for those who want to join. Next week's class is all about making an illusion necklace. So we've got some fun things. We've got for the next 3 Fridays, so 4 classes total. We've got 3 Fridays still to go with Meredith coming in at 3 o'clock every day or every Friday.
And that's 3 o'clock Central Time, right?
3 o'clock Central Time.
So my time is 4 o'clock Eastern Time.
We've also got some fun classes with seed beads. We've got, it's just some fun things, some good variety. We add classes all the time. So check back at michaels.com/classes to see what the latest and greatest things are, what we're thinking up next. We're talking to customers and understanding, what you enjoy and what you want to learn. And we're here to have fun. And this is free. And I hope you guys all learned something. And Meredith and Yvette, thank you so very, very much. I mean, I'm over here taking my own notes of this so I can remember the next time I go to the store, and I work in the department. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Super. Thank you so, so much.
Bye.
Bye, guys.